I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm excited for our episode today.
Me too. Me too. It's great weather for this. It's snowing outside, right?
I know I was thinking the same thing because I work from home the days that I
Mhm.
do my recording, and I was like, what a perfect day for me to work from home and have a podcast.
I completely agree. I guess to sprinkle more, I guess today's my birthday too. So I'm super
Happy
excited to be recording.
birthday!
Thank you.
So you're a Scorpio?
Yes, I am.
Or are you part of like, did you hear that Libras are actually extending out now to, um, I think it's till like early November, and then Scorpios are only like a week or like 2 weeks. Yeah, and then there's a whole new sign. There's a 13th sign.
I did not. I'm gonna have to do research into this. They're taking my thunder away. I'm upset because I've always been a Scorpio that was, born in the year of a tiger. That's been always my thing. So
Yeah, this is your identity. You can't change it now. You're too far in.
exactly, exactly.
Well,
So
happy birthday. Oh, I'm so pleased
thank
that
you.
you're here today with me on your birthday.
Yeah, thank you. Me as well. That's why when you send it to me for Thursday, I'm like, it's my day off. I'm like, I'm gonna do it. It's a great time to do it. So
Yeah, you said that was your day off and then it was okay. And I was like, is she sure? But you said yes, so I was just gonna go with it.
yeah. Well, I'm not working today. This is not work. This is fun to me. So
Good. I kind of thought so because you said this is a passion project of your own. So
yes.
yeah, I'm really excited. This is okay with you, for you to kick off on just like a quick introduction to Envision. Are
Mhm.
you happy to start there? And then we can kind of
Yeah.
go into like the diversity piece.
I'm Katya Weaklim. I'm the HR director for Envision for North America for Envision Digital Corporation. And I guess I will give you a little bit, shameless self promotion for the company about Envision Digital because I am super excited about what we're doing. So Envision Digital is a Singapore-based company that provides an end-to-end suite of products to help organizations navigate their decarbonization journey. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it in the news, with the new bills that we've been passing and kind of where we're going with renewables and trying to decarbonize our future. And so we're right in the middle of it all. And the good way to describe it, it's much in a way like Salesforce, which provides end-to-end platform and ecosystem to manage, all go-to-market operations. We do the same thing if you want to kind of think about it from that perspective. So, and I've been with the company for almost 3 years now, and it's been really it's been an exciting journey. So,
Thank you for that background. And
mhm.
that is that a new part of Envision, like a new company within Envision Digital?
Kinda. So we incorporated officially in 2018. So we belong to overall Envision Group, which Envision is a large organization of over 6,000 people globally. Envision Digital was kind of spun off, if you will. Into its own, corporation. 2018. So we're pretty young. We have that kind of startup-y feel, but we have been around for a bit. Envision as a whole has been around since 2007, so 15 years. And globally, Envision Digital, we have now 1,200 people actually. So we've gone from 30 employees 2018 to 1,200 in 2022. So
Wow.
yeah, it's it's been quite a crazy journey for us.
Yeah, that's a lot. And you joined in 2020, right? In like the heart of right at
Correct.
the beginning of
Oh
the
yes.
pandemic.
Yeah, pretty much after the lockdown. So I started in May, and lockdowns happened what kind of middle towards the end of March, right? As
Hmm.
I recall correctly, at least in our state. And so yeah, and I started very beginning of May. So everybody's trying to figure out how to do this remotely.
Yeah. I
So
think we are still kind of trying to figure out how to do this because it continues to evolve. But you've got about 14, almost 15 years of experience working in operations and human resources across different industries. And joining
mhm.
Envision was your first entree into the renewable energy industry. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I started my career as I say, kind of in manufacturing. So I have both of my business degrees in business from University of Wyoming. Got to give them shout out. Proud alumni. But yeah, I got a job straight out of college actually as I was going through college in manufacturing world and kind of became that operation supply chain person. And yeah, envision and kind of pivoted into HR, I guess, later on in my life. But HR has always been part of my role. It kind of all fell always fell into my lap, if you will. But renewables definitely, yeah, it started with Envision. Before it was different industries, anything from construction, like fiber, construction, to manufacturing scientific equipment. So
Great. So really,
yeah.
you run the gambit.
Oh yeah, and also I forgot there's tax resolution in there too. I worked for that as well. I did not know. It's a very definitely very interesting industry as well. So
I could imagine. So I
yeah.
think what's really interesting whenever I meet with human resources directors, managers, and the like, is kind of the I guess how human resources perceives and approaches diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then how hiring managers
Mhm.
approach diversity, equity, and inclusion for their respective teams. So I'm curious from where you sit, how do you think that these two teams interact when it comes to the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And what are some of the differences?
That's good. That's a really good question. And it has been part of my world, but not, immensely so until recently. And it's more just because the industries that I've been in, I always somehow, even though you talk about manufacturing, or construction, a lot of the industries I've been in were very niche. So, I've hired based on merit. That's always been my case, right? I don't look at, other aspects of the resume, but can I do the job? And it's become more of an important subject recently, right? And pandemic kind of, I think, launched us into that, the diversity, equity, inclusion. Now we're full force in, and it's definitely there's definitely still, I feel like, a disconnect between the hiring managers and HR in some ways. Not I would say absolutely not an Envision. We are a very diverse group. We have people from all over the world working for us. And what I mean all over the world, well, we're a global organization. What I mean is people, sit here in the United States. We have people from all walks of life and all different cultures, represented actually in our group. And I'm quite proud of that. And what's interesting for us, it kind of happened organically because we try to hire the best of the best in our industry. And as you know, because you worked with Envision for quite some time, people that we hire are difficult to find. We very, very niche. Excuse me, we hire blade design engineers on one side of Envision, and there's no school that puts out blade design engineers. It's aerospace engineers, it's mechanical engineers, it's kind of different, different variety. So it's definitely, it's been interesting trying to also find ways to bring more diversity, of course. And I don't see a lot of female engineers that come through, that apply. But we have had a few, actually. We have a couple of incredible women working for us, actually more than a couple at this point, that are, very, very talented engineers. So, but sorry, I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm veering off into a different direction.
That's
but
okay.
but in the past I have seen kind of a disconnect. But the nice thing is, with Envision, I do have that the seat at the table, with the hiring managers, with the
Mm,
leadership, and they do listen to me, they do take my advice, and kind of different things, we can potentially try to bring more diversity and to remove the potential biases that come along, with hiring process and everything else. So
great. Thank you. So I'm curious, you mentioned potential biases. I want to talk a little bit more about that. Coming from the HR side, what are some of the unconscious biases that you see coming up? And that doesn't have to be specific to Envision, but even just, even speaking with other people in your network.
sure. Yeah. Honestly, I'm just gonna use myself as an example because I have had that. I didn't speak to it. I am from a different country. I'm an immigrant. I'm from Russia originally. With the whole world situation right now, it's not fun to say you're from the country that's causing all the problems, but it is what it is. I am from there. I'm that's what I am. And I came to the United States when I was a teenager, so it's been quite a number of years since I've been here. And I did have, my maiden name before I got married was quite long. Even if you look at my current name, my full name is Ekaterina.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit more common, but my maiden name was definitely difficult to pronounce. And I feel like I've encountered that some places, I'm not going to speak to where I've applied for jobs in the past. This is quite a long time ago, a number of years ago when I was kind of more junior, kind of middle career, not where I'm at right now, that I think my resume was passed out because of my name. And that's something, that I see and I read about this a lot, that unique names, people tend to, bias or have a bias. I tend to discriminate against, and it frustrates me because I've been there myself, right? I can't prove it and not going to, but I'm pretty sure that happened.
Yeah.
And people that apply with my current employer, some of my colleagues' names I struggle to pronounce. I'm like, how
Mm.
do you say your name? I don't want to butcher it. And they go have like a short version of it, right? So, but anyway, so there's, of course, there's many unconscious biases that we can talk about, but that's definitely a big one, I feel like. If you look at application processes and people's resumes, and, name is the first thing you see, right, in a resume. And I think all of us, of course, carry certain biases, conscious or unconscious. It's human nature in some way. We can't just say, cut it all completely. I wish we could, but I don't know if
Yeah.
it's possible. But try to look past it. You look at people's, like I said, I hire based on merit, right? I hire based on, what they can bring to the table, their experience, their education, of course, plays a role, but is what they can do for us, right?
Mm.
And how passionate they are. That's what I care about. Not other pieces of their name that's maybe difficult to pronounce or what have you. So
Yeah, I'm so sorry you had that experience.
no, it's okay. It is what it is. Again, I can't, say yes or no for sure, but I'm pretty certain of it. It is what it is. As a female, I worked, mostly, I'll just say male-dominated industries.
Hmm.
Manufacturing. There's times I was the only female employee actually at the office. So it comes with its own, with its own experiences that were not super fun. But I managed through. I persevered. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish that wasn't the same experience that I've had just kind of I've been working in recruitment and staffing for 14, 15 years. And I used to work in the fashion industry.
Hmm.
So I experienced a lot of conscious or unconscious bias just in the industries that I worked in because people were immediately labeling, sex, pedigree, ethnicity,
Hmm.
just kind of based on how you could present coming to work because that's an important thing in the fashion industry. I don't think it's quite as well, one, some time has passed since I've worked in that industry, so hopefully it's different now. But I also think the renewable energy industry is in a completely different position and standing than what I've experienced in the past. But yeah, I wish we could all agree that this wasn't something that happens, but it
Hmm.
obviously does. And to your point, I don't think it's something that we can eliminate, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, we could try to work around it, and we could try to better ourselves as people, right? People first, not HR professionals or whatever, and then bring that to work, right? And try to not bring those biases to work when we can, So that's kind of how I see it. But yeah, I agree with you, and that's actually interesting. You say the fashion industry. Sorry, it's a little bit of diversion, but my mom actually was in Russia, which was very fascinating. She was a fashion designer actually for a number of
Really?
years. Yeah, yeah, she went to a Moscow Fashion Week at one point. She had her collection there. And I've been through the whole, castings with her for models, and
Yeah.
I can see how that industry, hopefully changed and improved. And it looks like just seeing the media, I think it has,
Yeah.
hopefully. But yeah, I can see what you're talking about. Absolutely.
Yeah, because there's a certain expectation of how you look in the industry, and that starts from the moment that you walk into even a corporate office, the retail space, all of it. It's about a
Mhm.
brand and
Yep.
how the brand is representing across the board.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, I
Yes.
think some of those images have shifted, and you can see that in advertising now that it's not just, a stick thin model anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's hopefully average women like myself and
Yeah, exactly. Just normal
so
people.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Just normal people off the street, that's what I want to see because that's what I am, right?
Yeah,
You think
exactly.
about
Because
it.
that's what
So
I'm going
yeah.
to look like when I try on the clothes.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah.
So to come back to the unconscious bias thing,
Hmm.
when we're coming from an HR perspective or a recruitment standpoint, I've worked with some clients in the past that have tried to mitigate unconscious bias by anonymizing resumes, like taking off where people went to school, taking off names and just, labeling them candidate one or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, how do you feel about those practices? Do you think they're effective, or do you think that's something that maybe we should try on a larger scale in the industry?
That's a very great question. I was hoping you would ask me that because this is a fun one. So as a side note, I belong to a global organization called Future Talent Council. I'm an advisor there, and actually, so I sit on one of the DEI think tanks. We have them once a month, and they're incredible conversation. I just fascinating to hear different perspective and views and how we can mitigate this of what you're talking about, right? And so one of the presenters on one of our think tanks a couple of months back, I wanted to reach out to him personally because I had some questions because I do struggle with that myself here, because as I mentioned, we recruit such a niche environment. It's to me it's really hard to say to try to pick. I feel like based on certain attributes versus what the person's skill set is, right? We'll just call it that. So I reached out to this gentleman, and I have his name written down because I want to make sure I give him the proper shout. It's Dr. Casper Knudsen. He's a partner chief consultant at the Living Institute, and he is in Europe, so not here. And so he had an amazing presentation about approaches to hiring and to removing the unconscious biases in our hiring processes, and as well as many other things just in a workplace environment. But hiring was kind of a big one. And so I had a discussion with him, and we talked about this. Actually, one of the things that you brought up is something that they did a case study on that we had a kind of a long discussion. And there's, of course, pluses and minuses to everything, right? It's not going to be perfect. And anonymizing, they didn't just talk about resumes. What their approach was not just so much removing the names, and we don't really in US we don't do gender, sex, anything like that, or pictures. In Europe, actually, sidetrack, super common to have a person's face plastered on a resume, which to
Yeah.
me is weird. And also their marital status and
Yeah.
how many children they have. I find that so weird. But anyway, in US, that's not the case. But anyway, so going back to my discussion with Dr. Casper Knudsen, is what they suggest is not even doing the resume piece, removing the resumes altogether. So either be the hiring manager or the HR person. So they are the ones that look at, of course, the resumes, but they encourage the candidates to submit pretty much their skill set. Is they submit an exercise based on their skill set and kind of how they would perform certain tasks, how would they deal with certain situations. And I typically tend to ask those questions in an interview anyway. I pose a question of, hey, if your manager ask you to do something you disagree with, what would you do? So things like these, right? Of course, you have to go deeper with the technical side of things because you have to make sure, especially where I work, technically the person is absolutely capable of doing the job. And so you cater the questions, of course, based on technical skills and of course soft skills. And you have each candidate submit, an essay, if you will, or maybe questionnaire, and you provide that, removing all aspects of the person, name, anything, just their answers, and that's it, to the hiring manager, and have them select based on just those answers. And you
Hmm.
can kind of take that process further, and then to see who and score. You can actually, they recommend they score the answers, which makes sense to me, right? And then whoever has a highest score, say he said, okay, you have side by side, two applicants that are very equal in many ways. And then at that point you can potentially look at other aspects of who they are and choose based on that, or not. It's kind of your call, right? And of course the caveats to it, their case study on it is fascinating. A lot of complaints that the hiring managers had when they did it, like, well, why would the candidate want to spend the time on this, and why it's a lot of time investment from the hiring manager or the HR person. And their kind of, response to all this, not complaints per se, but just concerns was, well, if the candidate's not willing to spend the time, then maybe they're not the right fit to begin with, right? And if it's on the organizational side, I think, there needs to be a good conversation. If it's a hiring manager that's doing it, HR manager is doing it, why would they not be willing to put the effort into this kind of process, right? So of course, there's pluses and minuses. It's not going to be perfect. And he said it himself when we spoke, but I have not tried it myself, but I really want to. Unfortunately, our hiring has expanded recently. It's not unfortunate, it's great. But because we're hiring kind of very limited case by case basis, I haven't been able to, because I kind of want to do a larger scope of jobs that we have out there. And we're growing tremendously. So I think this kind of approach can be applied, and I want to see how successful it can be. So I'm excited to try it out myself and report back.
I love that so much. I've never thought about this. Like it's kind of like the Elon Musk approach to cars, right? Like we have this expectation, like we just like every day, especially in HR and talent acquisition, we come in and we just like get a resume, interview or qualify somebody, present to the hiring manager, and then let them interview, go through the process, get to offer, and then that's what we do every single day.
Mhm.
And never in the last 15 years that I've been doing recruitment have I even like considered that it could be done a different way.
Mhm.
It's interesting how this case study just kind of flips the whole concept of talent acquisition on its head. Like there
Mhm.
could be another way that we can do this. And yeah, and the first thought that I had when you started describing this process was it's going to be a lot more time consuming and you're going to lose candidates in the process. And the truth is it's bespoke to every hiring manager too. Every manager needs to come up with either the questions or an exercise or like a, I don't know, modeling assessment or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be. Um, that can help them assess. That's not like too difficult that people don't want to do it. It takes them too long, but still gets them the information that they need to assess the skill set of the individual that they're interviewing. That's really, really interesting. I've never heard of anything like that. But I mean, why can't we do something different? Why do we just, keep doing the same thing over again and expect different results?
That's a good question. I think it's because we're creatures of habit, and what you define as a definition of insanity, right? You do something that
Uh-huh.
over and over, expecting a different outcome, right? But it's humans. I mean, we are creatures of habit, right? I mean, I find myself to be so. I have a routine every day, right? And I'm so used to it. I'm so comfortable with it. But I do, in my work, try to push myself and my boundaries, because I find different things like these, sitting through think tanks or just reading about different approaches, and be a TA or something else, right? And try to see where, push some boundaries, see where it goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's just we're so used to that, crank the wheel. To me, it's we're cranking the same wheel, right? Because we've kind of all somehow one way or another define this process, and we'll just follow it. Does it work? Yes. Is it perfect? No.
Hmm.
Right. And I like stepping outside the box. Like that's kind of my view on things. That's how I run myself, and it's how I function as an HR person. So.
Yeah, and then we also have other external factors that we need to consider on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis. Like in 2020, when we were hit with COVID, nobody knew how to adapt, and even the whole talent acquisition process, recruitment process had to change. People
Mhm.
used to be meeting in person all the time, and then, suddenly now we can't meet people in person anymore. We can only meet on Zoom, and then you need to make a decision based on that, which I think shows that we are adaptable
Mhm.
because we were able to continue to grow as an industry in the last 2.5 years, despite all the restrictions of COVID. But I'm actually curious for you in HR, and recruitment, um, what are some of the other talent challenges or adaptations that you've seen because of COVID?
That's a great question, because it's been on my mind ever since, really, and it has not left my mind, because I'm still trying to figure out the market. Because I recruit, obviously, as you know, we use your organization for recruitment purposes, but I recruit myself. I enjoy it myself. I like to do the whole passive recruitments and just reaching out to people and building my own network as well because I find it fun. And it's not just for engineers, that I hire. It's for, HR professionals like myself and other
Mhm.
people, just I find it, I enjoy that kind of, work, I guess. But I've been trying to like wrap my head around what happened with COVID and you know, how that changed the market and shifted so quickly too. And it's been a scramble to adapt. So what's interesting, so I've been with the company for just, going close to 3 years now. Um, During COVID, it was really difficult to recruit. And I understand why people, especially in the beginning, people just want to stay put, right? They're like, I don't know about this. I don't know where this is all going to go. We're all freaking out. We're all worried about our health, and our relatives' health. We're worried about leaving our houses, right? So people like, I'm just going to put the brakes on, with the job searches. So that's fair, but then, as things progress and we saw that this is not going away for a while, people I think kind of become more comfortable. I mean, I frankly myself switched jobs at COVID, right in the middle of it all. My
Mhm.
husband actually did too, about a year after me. He was actually part of that great resignation,
Mm.
which is we can kind of touch on that too if you want. But
Mhm.
um, it's I did still find it hard to persuade and convince people to leave their current employer and go to us. Even after, after a year and a half, that just was still, not happening. And people were very set, and even the ones that were looking, they weren't, I feel like maybe not as serious, or maybe they were quite picky because it seemed like everybody was fighting for the talent at that point. So it was definitely like a bloodbath, I feel like, in recruitment world.
Uh-huh.
So that's how I felt because I remember, trying to persuade people and, selling people on the company. And of course, it's part of my job, right? I I'm 100% in. I'm full into what we do and why we do it. And for me to sell it, it's pretty easy, right? Because I'm full in. But at the same time, it's still very hard to convince people.
Mhm.
And so it's post COVID, and even now, it's definitely not the same. And I think one of the big ones, actually, the subject I love to discuss with my managers that we some disagree on, and some, I'm like, we have to change our mentality here, is the remote work. That's been a definitely big debate for quite some time because we were remote for so long. People adapted, people loved it. And, for not for everybody, of course, you can't have everybody working remotely, but the kind of industry that I'm in, a majority of people can do their jobs from home, even myself including. I don't need to be in the office. And so it was definitely, interesting to see that shift and people's demands kind of went along with that, right? We have a bunch of engineers right now, senior engineers, they want to stay working remotely. They don't want to even do a hybrid schedule. They're like, I'm good. I am very productive at home. I love this. I can be with my family as well and have that time, which is very valuable. No commute anymore. So, but it's definitely been an internal debate. I have some managers that still do not like that idea, that do not like the remote idea, and that's mostly because the younger engineers and more junior, they have hard time getting up to speed. I guess their pace is slower to get up to
Mhm.
speed versus somebody who is in the office, just because how office functions. But anyway, so yeah, so kind of getting back to more the core of it, still trying to figure out. I feel like I feel like I have a more of a grasp, on things, and definitely, sadly, seeing some of these companies doing the layoffs and also pulling people back into the office, it's been playing to our advantage because we are very flexible. We are remote first, but we do have some hybrid, kind of setups as though people want it. And that's been advantageous to us. So for me, it was kind of, trying to pivot in a sense of what do candidates want? What is it that the number one, number two, number three, the top three, things that they actually want out of the employer? Yeah, obviously pay is one of them. That's an important one. Benefits. And notice the benefits has been a big one too, especially with the younger generations entering the workforce and in the workforce. Like that's been a huge deal for them, which I think is
Mhm.
awesome because I love benefits, talking about benefits. And of course, being flexible, remote,
Yep.
hybrid, what have you, being flexible and allowing for people to have that flexibility as well. So
Yeah, what I'm hearing is kind of like a couple things. Like pay and benefits are always, I don't know, in my experience, of course, those are always going to come up. That's part
Right.
of the package. But I find in the work that we do, the differences between pay and benefits tend to be marginal, more or less. There are definitely companies that pay over market in some cases. I don't necessarily think there's a lot of job security in that in the long term, but that's my own opinion. I don't necessarily see that as like a stabilizing force
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, but generally when it comes to benefits, unless it is an actual startup without kind of a foundation in the infrastructure to have benefits, generally, these are pretty comparable. Or they come out in other ways, like in a bonus or something like that, if a company doesn't offer a bonus, but maybe offers a pension plan or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of the changes with COVID, what I'm hearing is like the hardest thing to adapt to. Recruitment is hard in the best of times, but when you're going through a global pandemic and nobody really knows what the future looks like, or it really becomes clear that we don't know what the future looks like,
Mm-hmm.
there
Mm-hmm.
is there is a lot of fear and there is a lot of fear mongering going
Mm-hmm.
on. So the idea of making a career change during that was really destabilizing and
Mm-hmm.
dysregulating for a lot of people. And then also, it was an opportunity for us to kind of adapt our work preferences and or for companies to adapt to a more flexible hybrid workplace, when before companies were mostly, either one or the other, which is a positive change in the long
Mm-hmm.
term, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and then, like you mentioned, that there is an increase in demand. Like some industries completely were put on hold, and renewable energy was for a few months because of
Mm-hmm.
supply chain issues and, just restrictions and getting to work. But generally, it was, at 6 months in, it was full steam ahead still. So the demand increased during all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, it has a lot, and it's not continued to slow down, especially with, the new legislation that's been put through, right? And how hot of a market is right now. Everybody's wanting a piece of it, right? Everybody wants to be in it, and everybody wants to, participate.
Uh-huh.
So it's very exciting, but it's also created so many challenges for recruitment. Specifically, talent acquisition has been difficult, but it's been also exciting to see how it's all evolving, how it's changing, and
Yeah.
where it's all going to go potentially. I guess we'll see. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Katya, these are all the questions that I have for you, but is there something else that you'd want to talk about today that I haven't prompted with a question?
There's one thing. It's kind of, I mentioned to you, I guess I intend to do this myself at some point, do a podcast as well. So, but it's talent acquisition kind of segueing into, interview and interrogation, because it's a fun subject to me because it's a personal thing too, because I still, even, yes, I have my job and I love where I work, and, it's very exciting to be here. I'm still, sometimes looking at other opportunities and I'm interviewing. It's more just also to keep my interviewing skills, because I interview people constantly. That's what I do for living, right? It's one of my jobs. However, doing it in reverse myself, it's a very different kind of dynamic in a sense. And so I have had definitely some interesting experiences where some of the interviews were amazing, just great discussion like what you and I are doing, right? And some were literal interrogation. And I'm interviewing, I'm talking like HR director, VP of HR type role. So I'm like, what are we doing here? And so it's more just my statement to, to employers out there to, to potentially, that's I guess part of coming out of this COVID situation too, is revising your approach and interview process. Obviously, we talked about it earlier, right? And how you do it, if you bring in the DI aspect to it, but also just, revising the approach of how you interview. Because I hate sitting through an interview and they're just hammering on me pretty much with all these questions and one specific examples. I'm like, I don't know if I can come up with one. I'm sorry, like on the dime, Sure, I have
Mhm.
had millions of them, but on the dime, I don't know. Sometimes my brain just doesn't want to behave and, like just completely drawing the blank, right?
Yeah.
So, and to me, my approach is just having a discussion, because to me, that's the best way to get to know somebody, is to see who they are and see how the conversation goes, right? And see where it takes you. So
Yeah, more of a behavioral based approach
yeah.
versus like drilling someone with questions back to back to back, challenging
Hmm.
them like how much do you really know about what you've been doing for, however many years you've indicated on your resume.
Exactly, exactly. And then, especially when they ask some very specific things, and, we've all, as an HR professional, we've all dealt with really crappy things at work. We've all dealt with amazing things at work and things in between, right? So I've seen it all. And some of those things, I'm not going to draw on those experiences either because they were very personal to some of the employees. And I'm not going to, even though, yeah, they would not know who the person is, but I still would not want to bring that into a discussion. You know what I mean? I deal with a lot of confidential things in people's lives. I know a lot about people in their lives and many different things. And some of those things I'm just not going to share, with somebody. I don't feel like it's appropriate. So,
Yeah, and I think that's what's difficult about interviewing, and it really is an art from, I guess, from the interviewer's side. And to your point, we do this day in and day out, where we interview people and we kind of see, you probably also have a high EQ. And I think a lot of people in that say in talent acquisition and human resources do have high EQs. So, you're probably seeing things that maybe a hiring manager who isn't as practiced and who isn't interviewing as much as you are, um, kind of go to just what they know and not
mhm,
necessarily it's not really like a framework. It's just kind of like, a couple questions back to back on can you do this job? And then, kind of like, okay, can I work with you or not kind
mhm,
of thing. And it's
mhm,
not like as much of like a human approach where you get to really know like, could you do this job and kind of looking at the potential of somebody, of course, the technical skills, depending on what the position is. Like if you're doing blade design, for example, like something
mhm,
highly technical and specific.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think this is something that could also use some education.
Yeah, definitely. And I do have to draw kind of a small example for you as well. It was very positive for me. I was glad to hear it. The engineering team that I work with, we usually do a panel interview towards the very end, and I participate in it too. So we do the management, panel interview, and I'm one of the participants. And it was interesting because we started doing this when I started with the company, and for a while the guys were like, I don't know if I see value in you joining. I'm like, let's see where it goes. And so actually we have had a very fascinating experience with a candidate that he interviewed wonderfully throughout the whole process, technically just absolutely amazing. But then in the panel interview, I've asked him just some, kind of basic behavioral questions, and it just things went sideways very quickly for some reason. And the guys kind of saw value and actually came to me after the fact that I see a lot of value in you being there. So because you tend to reframe what people are thinking, because a lot of these people are so technical. That's all that they do. That's all that they're seeing, and you kind of snap them out of that when you ask them, you ask about career goals, sure, like what do you want to do when you grow up, right? But then you ask about like when did you have a conflict? Can you give me an example or how did you deal with it, And they're like, what?
Yeah.
Or did you do how like if you disagree with your boss? Like, did that ever happen? How'd you deal with it? They're like, it's interesting to see kind of the wheels start to turn for them, going completely different direction of what they were thinking, potentially. So the good news is, is that I was glad to hear from the team that it did bring a lot of value to them. That makes me happy. That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, you
So,
want to know that you're adding value, but then
right,
also, I mean, you should be like a respected member of that process
right.
because you're the one that's taking in people from the start, and we should be hiring whole people, like for their whole selves.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, it was definitely great. And my advice to others is to reframe their interview process to be comfortable and fun, because it should be fun. It should be a good conversation versus, I feel like you're being interrogated, because nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to work for a place where they feel like they may get interrogated because, they didn't do a task correctly. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's yeah.
absolutely. Well, I really appreciate how you have a very thoughtful approach to your career, and it's obviously something that you're very passionate about, and you really do like you bring a lot of really great ideas. You can tell that you bring a lot of really great ideas to your organization because you really genuinely care. So
Yeah,
I
thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And I do. That's people ask me why do you do what you do? Why do you like Envision or just, just my job? I'm like, it's the people, that's what I care about. It's the people and the experiences, and I just want to make it better.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, you can tell.
Thank you. Thank you very
Well,
much.
Katya, I really, really appreciate you joining me on my soapbox today. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I'm here to help on your podcast journey when you start recording.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. It was amazing, and I'm super excited to dive into it. And I may bug you about if I have some questions, but thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
It was great. It was a great discussion.
yeah, thank you.